My name is Emily. I met Ryan in my final year of college. He was older, steady, charming in a quiet, unassuming way. While other men tried to impress, Ryan simply listened. That was his gift. Or maybe it was his disguise. We fell in love gently, without fireworks. It felt safe, simple. I thought that meant it was real. 2 years later, we married behind my parents' lake house in a modest ceremony. I remember the way he looked at me during our vows, like I was his entire world, and I believed it. I remember thinking, this is it. I've won. But what no one tells you is that sometimes love is just the opening chapter to something much harder. We built a life that others envied to careers. Comfortable home, a dog named Milo, laughter at dinner. People called us perfect. I let them. I believed it too. Or maybe I just wanted to. About 4 years in, the change began so subtly I almost missed it. Ryan started working later, became distracted, short-tempered. His phone became a secret. His weekends turned into solo hikes, his explanations barely questioned. I chalked it up to stress. I loved him, so I doubled down, left notes in his car, made his favorite meals, gave him space when he asked. I did what I thought a good wife was supposed to do. I trusted Dot until the Tuesday that shattered everything. It was October. Came home early from school with pastries in hand, humming to myself only to find his shoes by the door. Strange. Then laughter from upstairs, a woman's laugh. I froze. I didn't run upstairs. I stood there waiting for logic, for reason, for a lie to make it all okay. Then she came down the stairs. In my robe, Ryan followed behind her, shirtless and pale. He opened his mouth. I raised my hand. I didn't need lies, not then. She left quickly. He followed, and I stood in the living room alone, still holding the pastry box. He didn't come home that night, or the next. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call him. When he finally did return, he was a shell of himself, apologetic, tearful. He told me it was a mistake, a 3-month-long lapse in judgment with a junior account manager named Lauren. He said she made him feel alive. I didn't scream, I listened. And with each word, something in me turned to stone. I told him to leave. He refused. I said calmly, "This isn't fixable. Not for me." He left. Friends rallied. Family hugged. But their warmth didn't reach the frozen place inside me. So I started planning not revenge in the cinematic sense, but justice. Not to hurt him, but to reflect him back to himself. Ryan valued one thing above all else: his reputation, his career, his control. He never disclosed his relationship with Lauren, which violated his firm's strict no fraternization policy. I documented everything: dates, messages, inconsistencies. I contacted Lauren anonymously, warning her of an HR inquiry. The fear did the rest. She confessed. She was fired. Ryan was asked to resign. He called me enraged. He knew it was me. Didn't deny it. I said, "You didn't just cheat on me. You betrayed everything we built." Now you know what that feels like? I filed for divorce that same week. I got the house. Milo stayed with me. The court sided with me. Dot to the outside world. It looked like a clean split. Grown adults parting ways. But behind that stillness was a storm he never saw coming. And after it passed, I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt nothing. Not because I missed him, but because the woman I had been, the devoted wife, the trusting fool, was gone. All that remained was someone raw, rebuilt from ash, wearing her pain like polished armor. In public, I smiled, I laughed, I worked, I functioned. But inside, a haunting stillness. Not sadness, something colder. A thirst for acknowledgement. Even those closest to me didn't know the full truth. Not my mother. Not Chloe. Not even my therapist. They knew he cheated. They didn't know how he blamed me for it. They didn't hear him say, "You were so busy being perfect." I forgot what it felt like to be wanted. As if my excellence, my loyalty, my wholeness was the flaw. That was Moment I stopped mourning the marriage and started mourning how long I made myself small for a man who didn't deserve me. That moment was the real beginning. It felt like Tobadiziered. He made it sound poetic, as Ifis affair were the natural outcome of me ambition and stability, as if his broken promises were my punishment for being dependable. And maybe that's why I couldn't let it go. I wasn't interested in petty revenge. I didn't want to scream at him in public or ruin his next relationship. That would be too easy and too forgettable. I wanted something lasting, something subtle. I wanted Ryan to feel what I had felt powerless. So E began to watch, not obsessively, just enough to gather the pieces of his new life. After losing his job, Ryan struggled. He tried to launch a consulting firm, but word spread fast in his industry. People didn't say it outright, but behind closed doors they questioned his ethics. Clients dropped off one by one. He moved into a modest apartment on the edge of town. Hisker, once his pride was sold within minutes. I wasn't watching out of satisfaction. I was watching to understand how far he'd fall before Hellicked inward, but he didn't. Instead, Hesperald, in search of distractions, dating apps, bars, shallow friendships, had tried to rebuild his ego, thought emporiously. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding myself, not just my life but me voice. I began journaling. Then slowly, I started writing under a pseudonym in line. I joined a platform for women who had experienced betrayal. I shared mystery, not all the details, but enough to connect. The words found resonance. Comments poured in from strangers thanking me for my honesty. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. I didn't name Ryan. I didn't have to, but through writing gave me clarity, and with clarity, one evening I received an anonymous message through my writing account. It was from a woman named Avashi. Said she had read my post and that something felt eerily familiar. She asked if I had ever been married to a man named Ryan who worked in marketing. My heart dropped. I replied cautiously, yes, why? Her next message was a paragraph long. She had dated Ryan briefly just a few months after our divorce. He told her his ex-wife had cheated on him, that he was the victim. He painted himself as a devoted husband who had been blindsided. Deva had believed him until she found a folder of emails between him and Lorenin, his old cloud storage. She confronted him. He admitted to lying and said he had moved past. Edeva didn't buy it. She dumped him, blocked him, and moved on, but she wanted me talk. No, she thought I deserved the truth, she said. You're not the only one hurt. I thanked her, and then I cried, not because I was sad, but because I realized how deeply Ryan's need for control and admiration had poisoned so many lives, and yet he still saw himself as the hero. That's when the idea came to me. I had already been writing anonymously, but what if I turned my experience into something more? A podcast, a series, a real platform for women like me? I didn't want to name names. I wasn't seeking defamation or drama. I wanted awareness, a safe space, a community built on truth. I called it Reflections, just a voice, mind sharing stories of infidelity, recovery, and resilience. I invited guests, interviewed other women. We didn't shame, we didn't attack, we told stories. We shed light. Within 6 months, Reflections gained traction. Women from around the country I reached out. Some had never told their stories aloud before. Some were still in toxic relationships. Some had just escaped them. The podcast became therapeutic just for listeners, but for me, and yet I still kept tabs on Ryan. I learned through a mutual friend that he had applied for a leadership role at Astertup, one that heavily promoted female empowerment and ethical leadership. He was trying to clean up his image there, and he made me laugh, but I didn't act immediately. I waited, watched, listened. A month later, a listener reached out to Mesh, worked in HR at the same company Ryan had applied to. She mentioned they were vetting a candidate whose past seemed questionable. She asked if I had ever heard of him. I took a breath and said, yes. I shared my story, the facts, no exaggerations, no bitterness, just the truth. A week later, Ryan's application was quietly withdrawn. I never heard from him directly, but I imagined he knew it was me. Still, I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat. I simply recorded another In that episode, I said revenge isn't always a grand gesture. Sometimes it's choosing not to stay silent, standing tall when someone tries to reduce you to rubble. My voice trembled as I spoke, but it was strong. That episode went viral suddenly. Reflections was stanch, just a podcast. It was a movement. People began sharing it under hashtags. Other creators reached out. I was in Veto, speak at events, write a book, elaborate on a documentary. My story became the doorway to hundreds more. And through it all, Ryan faded. He moved out of state. I heard tried to start over again, but the shadow of his choices followed him, not because the truth has a way of echoing louder than lies. It's strange how healing can look like eye singe from the outside. But I wasn't trying to ruin his life. I was reclaiming mine, and I wasn't finished yet. When people talk about healing, they usually picture a gentle journey, sunrises, yoga mats, deep breathing, but in my experience, healing is far messier. It's grief in the grocery store, rage in the shower, silence that stretches too long, and forgiveness that comes in pieces, not waves. After reflections took off, my life transformed in ways I could never have imagined. I was no longer just a woman's corned. I became a voice, a guide, and unexpectedly a symbol of something stronger than heartbreak: resilience. Booty never forgot where it started, not out of bitterness, but because that chapter mattered. I owed my transformation not just to the betrayal, but to how I Chesito respond. Toit Ryan still lingered in my memory like an echo in a house. I no longer lived. Eni didn't check up on him anymore. I didn't need to, but every once in a while his name would come up. Someone from our old circle would casually mention, "Did you hear what happened to Ryan?" And I'd listen, not out of curiosity, but from acum distance. The last I heard, he was working freelance, struggling to gain traction. His dating history was a carousel of short-term relationships shelled as quickly as they started. He was still chasing something, but no one quite knew what. I didn't hate him. I didn't pity him either. He made his choices, and I made mine. A year after our divorce, I launched a foundation, Turning Point. It offered resources for women navigating emotional trauma, betrayal, and major life changes. Legally affairs, therapy, grants, support, circles, things I wish I had during those first dark months. I built a small team, mostly volunteers at first, but all of them passionate, all of them survivors in one way or another. Our motto is simple: your ending is just the beginning, and that became my truth. But just when I thought it closed that chapter for good, life handed me a strange full circle moment. It was a crisp afternoon in early spring. I had been invited to speak at a corporate leadership summit in Anather City. One of the breakout sessions focused on workplace ethics and personnel control. As I scanned the speaker list, a familiar name jumped out. At Mayan Esteller. At first, I thought it must be someone else. But when I clicked on Thebio, there was no doubt it was him. Same company, history, same face. He was scheduled to speak about navigating professions, setbacks with integrity, and nearly laughed. A younger version of me would have backed out or stormed in and confronted him on stage, but I had changed. I didn't need to humiliate him to prove anything. I had already won in the quietest and loudest ways possible, so I didn't cancel when the day arrived. I wore a pale blue dress and tied my hair in a bun. Clean, calm, confident, I walked into the auditorium and saw him from across the room. He hadn't seen my. He looked older, not just physical, but tired, hollow around the edges. Who are a crisp suit, but it hung on him like armor. I watched him shake hands with attendees, smiling in that same performative way he used to reserve for dinner parties and client meetings. When it was his turn to speak, I sat in the back row. He started strong, charming audience with his practiced charisma. Had talked about lessons learned, about accountability, about owning one's story, but then mid-sentence he paused, his eye scanned the room and landed on me. There right was that flicker of recognition. His words stumbled just slightly, just enough for me to notice. He recovered quickly, content his speech, and avoided looking at me again. When I took the stage ladder in the afternoon, I didn't reference him. I didn't mention the past. I simply told me a story about trust, betrayal, and building again. I told it not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a woman. Whoa. Had rebuilt her world brick by brick. The applause was long and standing. Ryan was gone before it ended. I never saw him again after that, and that was fine. His chapter was over. His shadow didn't live Herinium. A few months later, I published a book titled Shiz to Architecture. It was part memoir, part roadmap, and part tribute to every woman who had ever had to rebuild from the ground up. The launch was modest at first, but the reception surprised me. It became a bestseller in the personal development category. More importantly, it became a lifeline for women who had felt alone. In their pain, somewhere in the chaos of betrayal, I had found purpose. One day, while sorting through Mills, I received a message that made me sit still for a long time. It was from Lorena Sloran. She introduced herself humbly, said she had no intention of freshing the past or defending herself. She just wanted to thank me. She had been in therapy for the past year, confronting her choices, her role in the affair, and the patterns that led her there. I was young and naive, she wrote, but I wasn't innocent. And I'm sorry, not because things fell apart, but because I didn't think about what I was doing to another woman. It was the apology I never thought I needed, but it softened something in me. Wrote back, not with anger, not with blame. I said, thank you for taking accountability. I hope you're healing too. We both deserve that. And I meant it in the end. This story isn't really about Trian. It's not even about Lauren. It's not even about what we do with our pain. Some people bury it. Some people let it destroy them. And some, like me, build something entirely new. I'm remarried now to a man named Daniel, kind, steady, aquiote force in a noisy world. He knows my past, and he respects it. He never asks me to shrink my strength. He encourages E2R. Love isn't flashy, it's real, grown from understanding, not fantasy. Sometimes late at night, I still think of the girl I was, the Emily Wasthood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen with a pastry box in her hand. I want to hug her, tell her she survived, that her world will not end. It will just get ruined. And to anyone listening, anyone standing at the edge of a betrayal they didn't see coming, this is what I want you to know: you are not broken. You are not to blame, and you are not alone. Let pain